What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome to Around the Berg. We're here this week with our week one preview of the matchup between the Steelers and Bills. We'll also go over TJ Watt's contract extension negotiations and some other news and notes of the week. But first, I'll introduce my co-host, Shayne Kubas. Shayne, how you doing today?
I wish I'd be doing better, but we still have to talk about a certain player and his contract situation. But otherwise, doing all right.
Yeah, we wish we were coming with more glad
Right,
tidings of
yeah,
contracts in the $150 million range. But
right,
alas,
exactly.
we'll pull back the curtain again, as of 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday night, TJ Watt is still unsigned. So, however, he did practice today, which
hmm
to Mike Tomlin said the day before, he said that TJ would practice. So that prediction came true. And Tomlin said something to the media in the effect of TJ's built different, as the kids say. So he doesn't
Right.
need to have a full week of practice.
hmm
But the big issue, it seems to be the amount of guaranteed money in the contract and how it's spread out over the length of the deal.
Yeah, and this is for those who have followed Steelers for a long time and understand how their contract negotiations typically go. This is what they've always done: is they like to not guarantee money past the first year or so of the contract, and there's reasons for that. Obviously, it makes it a lot easier to move money around later on to get contracts figured out in a way that they can add to the team in ways they wouldn't be able to otherwise, and that's great and it helps the team. However, TJ knew this going into this, and so if this is still a
Mm.
problem, it means that he expects to be treated in a little bit different way, which I can't argue with him about. I understand that's how the Steelers have done it for a long time, but this is a guy who's going to be a all pro level player who's going to be competing for defensive player of the years. I don't think that it's worth messing around with him. I just don't.
Right. So we saw him, we quibbled with the veracity behind the NFL top 100, but he was voted the ninth best player in the NFL, the top edge defender, the second best defender overall. So
Mm-hmm.
he's a highly respected player among league circles. I was mentioning earlier that a lot of agents around the league are rooting for TJ Watt
Yeah, for
essentially to
sure.
win these negotiations because so many of their clients in the past have been, in effect, screwed over by this rule from the Steelers. And they
Mm-hmm.
think that TJ Watt, given that he is such an elite talent, might be the one to actually finally break that rule, which would be good. And TJ got some support from his quarterback I think it
Yeah.
was today or yesterday,
Yeah.
where Ben said that TJ should get whatever he wants, which I'm sure that Kevin Colbert and Omar Khan were not thrilled to
Yeah,
hear that
but
from Ben.
he's right though, and he even mentioned he's like that's one of the reasons why he came back
Mm-hmm.
into
Exactly.
took a pay cut. I mean, he was going to have to anyway, but he took it because he wanted his guys, the guys that are making this team both good now and in the future, he wanted them to be here. And if you're going to take a chance on not doing what you've been doing for so long, this is the time to do it with a guy who, if Aaron Donald didn't exist, would have won the Defensive Player of the Year last year,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this is not a complicated thing to me. Like it's always more complicated than the average fan or even guys like us would like it to be, but this is pretty simple. He's going to be the highest paid defender in the NFL. That's what's going to happen. That's what needs to happen. He's the next guy up. That's how this works, right? Like that's just how it ends up being.
Right. And like I said earlier, I think we're hearing that the number is somewhere around $150 million, probably in the 28 to $30 million a year range.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of how those guarantees are being distributed. But
Right.
the news today was that TJ Watt did return to practice and he was a full participant. So that there were some reports from Brooke Pryor that she said that when she was doing her hit for ESPN, that they were running out of the building saying he's signing. As of, like I said, 8:30, that is not come to pass. There's been a video from, I believe, Najee Harris's Instagram where you can
mm-hmm.
hear Derek Watt in the background say something about something being backtracked or backlogged because TJ hasn't signed until today or something to the effect of that. So there's a possibility we wake up tomorrow and it's signed or it's announced that it's been signed, but it's good to see him back at practice, at least for a few days where he can get up to speed.
Yeah, that's a really good sign. I think that if there was no progress or there was no, possibility of it getting done, I think that there'd be less of a chance of him playing right now, or at least him being willing to come and play and practice while not having that deal. So I hope that obviously before Sunday rolls around, we know for sure whether it's going to get done this season or not.
Yeah. And I think that the big reason why this guaranteed money thing was such a sticking point for him was I think he learned from JJ's
Yeah.
experience,
hmm
where JJ had a lot of injury problems as well. So TJ just wants to guarantee that in case that happens to him, because TJ Watt actually has a decent amount of injuries in college, and that was kind of one of the reasons he fell to the Steelers, I think.
Yeah.
So I think he just wants to prevent that from hindering his ability to earn money in the future. But we'll move on from there, and we promise that we'll be refreshing Twitter in the background as we record. And if we get the news, we will report it live on this podcast. But the other quote big piece of news is Le'Veon Bell signing to the Ravens practice squad. Now, Shayne, I don't know about you, but when Le'Veon Bell was with the Steelers, he was my favorite player. I absolutely loved him. I, was in a very difficult place during his contract negotiations, and, was sad when he had left eventually, but it's been a pretty steep downhill trend for Le'Veon since he left Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and like you said, the quote unquote big news, if it's big news at this point, I think the thing with Bell, right, is that when he was playing for us, he was one of my favorite players, of course, as well. I think kind of pretty much any Steelers fan would tell you that. I think his problem, outside of just not taking a deal that was realistically probably better than the one he got from the Jets anyway.
It was confirmed better. That's fact.
Better. Yeah. He went to a team within the Jets who clearly didn't have the infrastructure around him to let him do what he's special at, which is stand behind the line for way longer than any running back ever should, and then find a hole and make people look stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to blame the Jets. It's like, hey, you don't have one of the best offensive linemen of the last decades. And
that's
so,
the problem. It's not even the Jets.
Point.
Yeah, it's not the Jets' fault necessarily. It's the fact that Le'Veon didn't understand that, if he was Le'Veon Michigan State, the 260-pound bruiser, he probably would have been okay because he's just pounding through guys. Mm-hmm. He reinvented himself as this one of the most unique running backs I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And it's great if it works, but if it doesn't, you average 3.5 yards carry. Mm-hmm. And we even saw his last year, the Steelers, where his yards per carry dipped a little bit and things like that. His style was so predicated on that, the strength of the offensive line and them being able to stand their ground and open up places for him to go through. And I just think at this point, he's a third down back he's a great receiver. He's always been a great receiver. He's a reliable guy that you can throw the ball to, but he's not a good runner of the football anymore. And I don't think he's going to be.
Right. So they only signed him to the practice squad. And I think the primary reasons were J.K. Dobbins went down with an Achilles injury last week, I think. And then Justice Hill, their other kind of more designated third down back, went down with an injury as well. So Dobbins is definitely out for the season, and Justice Hill is out for a while. They still have Gus Edwards. They have this other running back, Tyson Williams, who some people are a fan of if you have a very deep fantasy league.
Yeah, that might be.
Which I don't, and I'm just kind of. But anyways, I digress. But so I guess the big question is, do we care?
I mean, I don't really, because like I said, best case scenario, he's a third down rotational back. He's not taking carries from Gus Edwards. He's not taking, he might not even take carries from, like you said, Tyson. I think he's going to be brought in just to replace what they expected Hill to bring to the offense with Dobbins out. And that's probably about it.
So, so the Steelers play Baltimore the first time in week 13. Mm-hmm. Do you think he's on the team at that point? And if so, do you think he's on the active roster at that point?
I think he'll be on the active roster pretty soon into the season. I think once they get a good look at him, unless he's just bad. If he doesn't look good, then maybe he never even makes it to the active roster. But if he's, conditioned, if he's ready to play, we'll probably see him pretty soon. And then how long he's on the active roster is probably just based on, do they still need him to play that role by week 13? Is he doing a good job in that role? I think if they limit him just to those third down duties, he'll probably look well enough, good enough to hold on to a spot, but that's about it. So
right. So Justice Hill's injury is season ending. So both of their other backs are out for the year. And like you said, like Edwards is definitely more of the downhill thumper kind of back, and Bell can be that pass catching back, which I feel like he's just going to rip our hearts out at some point if he does. If he's on their active roster for Baltimore, I'm going to be apoplectic.
It's bad. I mean, it sucks because it's the Ravens. Like, if it was any other team or not in the division, like, I would care even less than I do.
I still can't believe he tried to throw Andy Reid under the bus.
That was so. Yeah, I still remember.
Like, he is perfect for that offense. I don't understand why he's complaining.
Yeah, that's the thing, is he's really, like, I really thought when that came out that he said that, I thought he'd never play again.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
like if you badmouth Andy Reid in the NFL, most people are gonna just look at you like, all right, whatever, man. And then on top of that, if you can't succeed with the Chiefs, I don't know who
Right.
you can succeed with,
Yeah,
frankly.
exactly.
So we'll see if he can hang on to a spot or even get on the team.
Right. Okay. So we'll move back to the Steelers. So the week 1 depth chart obviously came out. Not too many surprises.
Yeah.
We see so the Steelers are starting 2 rookies along the offensive line, Dan Moore at left tackle and Kendrick Green at center. And I was doing some research on this. I think there are only maybe like less than a handful of teams that are starting at 2 or more rookies on their offensive line. And I know 2 of them are the Packers and the Chiefs. So 2 Super Bowl presumed favorites.
Hopefuls, yeah.
Exactly. And then Chukwuma Okorafor starting at right tackle. So, as expected.
Yeah, pretty much with that.
And then I guess the kind of one interesting aspect of this is that at tight end, we got the or designation where you have Eric Ebron or Pat Freiermuth listed as the starters there.
That's an interesting one to me just because I really feel at this point, I'm going to give it till like at the latest, maybe week 7-ish. Maybe
I would say bye week's week 7. So
bye week, like around there before Freiermuth is out snapping Ebron pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
Like the problem is like, one, he's such I think he's going to be a better blocker day 1 by a lot.
Oh yeah, no
right?
question.
Like, we have no questions about him as a blocker at this point.
Which Freiermuth isn't, the most dominant blocker. That's more just an indictment on Eric Ebron.
Right, Ebron just, that's not his game. That's
exactly.
Fine.
Yeah.
But Freiermuth showed enough in the receiving game, both in camp and in the preseason, that makes me think that, I mean, sure, Ebron will have his plays, like he'll get in and he'll be that, middle of the field / deep threat across the middle up the seams.
Yeah.
But Freiermuth in the red zone, especially, like that's probably the reason they have the starter designation right now. Between the 2 of them is probably because once we get into the 20-yard line, Freiermuth's in the game, and he might be the only one.
Yeah.
Like that, that's probably a big part of it. Is that
I think the other part of this is that, with Matt Canada's offense, it's so predicated on 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. So they're both going to be that's kind of what it's about. I think mostly is that they're both going to be on the field at the same time. So it's, you can't really designate one as the quote starter if they're both in the field. So the other thing I think would be interesting would be that Chris Wormley is listed as the starter at the DN spot, which is usually occupied by Stephon Tuitt, but we went into that last week where he's going to be out for a few weeks. And then the other thing would be Cameron Sutton is listed as the starter at right cornerback, and there is no slot corner starting position, which Tomlin said they're omitting that as a competitive advantage against the Bills for this week.
Which that's interesting to me because I mean, slot corner position is such an interesting one for the Steelers right now because I expect still that Sutton's going to see a good bit of time there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that especially if they're running 2 corners ever, then yes, he'll be the right cornerback. But I think a good amount, probably at least 50%, if not more of the time when they are going into, their nickel or dime packages, he's going to be that inside, like he's going to be the slot corner most of the time there, I think.
Yeah. I don't really foresee a world where Arthur Mollett is going to be taking those snaps from him. But I think the competitive advantage thing that Tomlin cited is interesting because I was talking to I'm not sure if I mentioned this in this podcast, but I was talking to a college coach who said that him and his staff went to tour the Ravens facility actually, and they were talking to John Harbaugh, and he said something to the effect of, there's no way you can really like out scheme your opponent individually in the NFL because everybody knows everything. Everybody knows all the terminology, all your tendencies, all your, tells. And this, I think we talked about this with the Ben Roethlisberger foot controversy from the summer. Exactly. So, I think the Bills have a pretty good idea that Cameron Sutton's going to be the starter at slot corner. And maybe the Steelers try to throw him a curveball. They activate Carl Joseph and he plays some kind of box safety hybrid thing. Role, But, so it's just some, I think some fun gamesmanship for Tomlin. Because I think him and McDonough have a bit of a relationship. So
I think I believe so. Yeah. And I think that
they're both William and Mary. They're both William and Mary.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even if they weren't, they're getting to know each other pretty well, playing each other.
Yeah, right. All right. So again, the depth chart is pretty much what we expect with a few exceptions. But before we get into our breakdown of the full Bills game, I wanted to do something a little fun. So we are going to do our predictions for the Steelers awards. So at the end of this regular season, the Steelers typically give out 2 awards. They give a team MVP award and the Rookie of the Year award, which I believe is the Joe Green Award for the
Mhm.
Steelers. So Shayne, I'll let you pick. Do you want to go first for the team MVP or the Rookie of the Year selection?
Well, I mean, I have a feeling that we both kind of know what the Rookie of the Year selection is going to
Yeah.
be, I assume.
Mhm.
So just to make it fun, I'll go first on the one that's not as obvious.
Oh,
I
wow,
think
you're too kind.
I think for the team MVP, especially considering it might end up being, depending on what happens over the next few days, it could end up becoming a contract year for him.
Mm,
I feel like we have to go TJ. Like
mhm.
he's without, obviously Highsmith. We have a lot of hopes for, so we'll see what he can do as a second edge rusher, and having Ingram in there is great, but he more than ever needs to have that type of caliber season he had last year. And if he can do
Mhm.
that again, repeat that, I don't see anybody else being the MVP of the team.
Yeah, and I think your point about Highsmith is interesting. I just think that even with Watt drawing double teams and chips and extra blockers and everything, I just don't really see a path where Highsmith is going to be able to surpass or even really get close to Watt's production, especially if he's going to be splitting a decent amount of time with Melvin Ingram at that other
Right.
outside linebacker spot. So that gives me the opportunity to I'll take my team MVP, then I'll take first for Rookie of the Year, I guess. So I'm gonna go with probably again the very chalky pick of I'm just gonna go with Ben.
Listen, I will say your pick is the one that I'd rather be correct, because that means he probably went off.
Yeah, so
Like,
I guess I'm being optimistic as well.
right.
But
Yeah.
you know,
That'd be
I
great.
I
Yeah.
was thinking about this because I was like not like I don't think any of the receivers individually are going to be able to have a major statistical season that would
No.
have them earn this. Juju could have another kind of similar season where he puts up some more numbers and he's valuable in non-statistical ways. I don't see an offensive lineman winning.
No.
And
I
then, TJ
unfortunately,
was one pick, maybe Minka. I think Minka would probably be the
Minka's another
next one
good
off the
one.
board,
Yeah.
but I think that those are probably the obvious ones. So then I'll go first for Rookie of the Year, and because Shayne foolishly let me have this pick, I'm going to go with Najee Harris because as we've talked about since we started this podcast, that Najee Harris is arguably going to be the focal point of this offense this year, especially moving into
Yeah.
the future in the post Ben Roethlisberger era. And I think he's going to start that off this year. I mean, I think there's already been talk and betting about if he's going to break Franco Harris's rookie rushing, I think maybe scrimmage yards record.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up, but I think it's like 1,064 yards, and I think he can break that just rushing.
Yeah. He
He'll
could.
crush it with scrimmage yards, but
Mhm.
I think Najee's going to have a huge year, assuming he stays healthy. Please God, keep him. Lord, carry him now. Please keep him safe.
Seriously.
He can
Yeah.
have my knees or whatever he needs from my body. I'll
Seriously.
give it up.
Right.
But
Honestly.
yeah, my pick is Najee Harris.
Yeah. I mean, my head tells me Najee as well, right?
Mhm.
My heart is telling me Presley Harvin the third.
Oh, let's go.
But
Oh, I love that.
like listen, he could end up being, depending on how this offense looks, even if the offense looks good, he could be a big part. We haven't had a punter in forever that can legitimately flip the field and give us good field position. I think the defense will be really, beneficial. That's going to be really beneficial to them, especially if the offense does struggle a little bit. At least if they are going to be on the field a lot more, maybe it'll be in better situations. I think, I mean, obviously
Listen,
you're right.
your reasoning is perfect. I didn't even think of it honestly, which
Right. Yeah.
I'm kicking myself. I
Yes,
didn't think of
I had
this.
to.
Oh my god. Well, yeah, I mean, Shayne basically says the stock couldn't be higher on Presley Harvin, and
Here we
yeah.
go. All right. Here we go.
So
All right.
Symbol is the stock market for sports where you can buy and sell virtual shares of your favorite teams using real money. Each time your team wins, you earn a win payout. If your team loses, you lose nothing. Symbol offers trading for the NFL, NBA, and MLB with college football coming this fall. Visit https://symbol.app today and use promo code SteelersATB to earn a $10 deposit bonus on your first deposit. That's https://SIMBULL.app. So now we're going to get into the preview of the Steelers Week 1 matchup with the Buffalo Bills. And Shayne, for me, I think the theme of this matchup for the Steelers, I guess, is going to be the story of two overhauled units on the Steelers. And they're the units that ostensibly are there to prevent negative plays from happening on both sides of the ball. And that is the offensive line and the cornerback room.
Yeah. And this is, I think, the biggest thing that is going to sway this matchup opposed to the last two. Is last year we played the Bills during our skid where we started to fall apart on offense, and the defense played valiantly, but broke a couple times in that game. And the offensive line was a big problem last year in that game specifically. We could not run the football. We were so one-dimensional, more so in that game than almost any other one, honestly, from the rushing attempt numbers and production we got out of that team or that group of guys. And this offensive line has to, with the help of Najee now, they have to establish line of scrimmage and be physical enough for us to be able to lean on the run game and keep the ball out of Allen's hand. That's such a big deal in this first game, especially with what Allen did last year, even though he didn't light it up against us, luckily, because of the defense. He is such a better player than he was 2 years ago when we played him. And I think he'll even be better last year overall, this year than last year.
That's
And
quite a statement.
and I think just from like everything that he's going to be doing as far as like the production might be very similar, but I think he'll be a better football player this year because he's gotten a chance to see what it's like to play with guys like Stephon Diggs and get a rhythm with them. I think that's just going to continue to get better.
It's interesting because a lot of people are predicting him to kind of regress from an efficiency standpoint, given that his leap from where he was to before last year to last year was so unprecedented that we've never really seen a quarterback change their game so much and become so efficiently in a blink of an eye, basically. So that's it. I'm interested to follow that from that perspective. So yeah. The offensive line, like you were saying, you got to establish the run. And it's weird because, you think you're playing the Bills. They're a high-powered, high-scoring offense. You're like, okay, we got to throw the ball. And that's part of it. But you also can try to slow the game down, keep the ball out of the Buffalo Bills' hands. You also give your defense rest, which is going to be extremely important. And then, as we've kind of been saying the whole offseason, if you establish the run game, it helps your play action, which can help you get some big plays. So I couldn't agree more with that. With the cornerback room, we're basically this is the James Pierre game. This is where we're going to find out if he is an NFL caliber player, because the Bills are going to come out with a lot of wide receivers. They last year, over 90% of their plays came with 3 or more wide receivers on the field. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see Stephon Diggs out there. Obviously, you're going to see Cole Beasley, and a name familiar to Steelers fans. They brought in Emmanuel Sanders this offseason, and they've got some good depth guys too. So I think my biggest worry, though, is I think we're going to see the Keith Butler special a lot this game.
I could see it.
I'm terrified.
Yeah, I think the problem with this game too is like clearly Diggs is the 110% absolute. He needs to be the guy that they focus a lot of their attention on. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you do open yourself up to, Beasley in the slot, assuming he's, allowed to play, which, we're not going to get into that.
It's dubious.
Emmanuel Sanders is an older player at this point. Didn't look great last year.
I mean, he was fine. I thought he was fine.
He's still a threat for sure.
Yeah.
You can't just leave him alone.
No.
James Pierce probably going to have to cover him most of the game. I imagine that's going to be his main matchup most likely on the outside. It just depends on what kind of looks they give us with those 3 guys, and Gabriel Davis too.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. What I would want the Steelers to do is ideally, the problem is the Steelers are so married to the idea of stopping the run, and I get that, but the Bills' run game is not very strong, and they don't care.
They don't care. No,
so they're essentially what the Steelers were doing last year. They just don't care about running the ball.
They really don't. No.
The problem is they're super efficient at throwing the ball all over the field.
Right.
So I'm worried the Steelers are going to basically go business as usual. Run cover 3, run cover 1, keep a safety kind of rotate safeties down to the box to stop the run, not play a nickel, which is going to be a catastrophic. Yeah. What I would want them to do is kind of take a key out of the Fangio defensive tree where you're playing into 2 safeties high almost all the time. You are primarily going to stop the pass. What I would like them to do is ideally kind of go with what the Patriots try to do a lot, is they'll put their best corner on the number 2 receiver, who ostensibly would be Emmanuel Sanders. Joe Hayden, Emmanuel Sanders, fun battle of veterans.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then you put your second corner with safety help on the number 1 wide receiver.
Right.
Bracket them. There's a lot of names for it. I can't remember all of them right now.
Yeah,
but
I know what you're talking
exactly.
about.
And then you can leave Cam Sutton versus Cole Beasley in the slot. And that's, I'm comfortable with that matchup. But, as we've said, I'm worried that we're going to see a lot of Alex Highsmith, Devin Bush on Cole Beasley. The other problem is all of their receivers can play well in the slot.
They can. Yeah. And the problem with Diggs too, for me, is I'm struggling in my head to think of who of the corners we have, who do we want to be the primary cover guy in him? And like you said, maybe we do something where Hayden does cover Sanders and we let Pierre try to deal with Diggs with the help of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And I think no matter who ends up being that guy, I hope they at least give him help over the top too, so he can at least focus on, because in last year's game, 10 catches for 130 yards and touchdown. He just lit us up on those shorter routes and he kept getting first downs and keeping drives alive. We have to be more physical with him and not allow him to get those 9, 10, 11-yard catches every time they target him.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
The problem with what strategy I would want to employ is I feel like that puts James Pierre in a pretty rough position.
It does.
In that he could get burned a lot and lose confidence quickly. And
Right.
I don't want that to happen. And I think that, we talked about Joe Hayden and his, possibly waning speed last episode. And Diggs is obviously extremely fast. He's not, your Tyreek Hill burn you straight down the field all the time.
Player
it's more quick. And else. I think Hayden can maybe do a better job of combating that, just given his savvy and, technique, especially as like a press man corner. So, we'll get into another conundrum of stopping the Bills offense. And that's, I'm not really sure how you attack Josh Allen.
It's a question mark after last
because year. I think the one option is you go with kind of what the Steelers traditionally do is just blitz the hell out of him and try to flush him out of the pocket. The problem is if he's out of the pocket, he's a running threat and he can create some crazy plays. The other option is you rush him with only 3 or 4 and you have a QB taint or QB spy kind of thing going. And, maybe you kind of just hope the pocket collapses with that and he eats a sack, but I don't know what to do.
That's the problem is I feel like it's going to have to be a little bit of both. Cause I feel like I might start off with an aggressive blitzing mentality to try to get him off his spot early and try to rattle him a little bit in the first week of the season.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, if he's getting out of the pocket and making plays with his legs or getting guys open down the field on broken plays, then you have to try to corral him and keep him in the pocket and try to collapse that pocket, which should be even easier theoretically this year with having 3 legitimate edge defenders now.
Yeah, that's true.
Play. And I expect to see a lot of 3 of those guys on the field together, honestly, because of missing Tuitt and relying on Wormley to play. So that could be a more viable strategy than normal, honestly. But they're probably going to have to play around with both. I do like the idea of trying to see if you can get him rattled with the blitz first, and then if he's taking advantage of that, then you try to back off a little bit and keep him contained then.
Right. In terms of what the Steelers are going to do on offense, like we said, we're going to try to run the ball, establish some play action, try to bleed the clock a little bit. I think the matchup to watch is whoever is lining up across from the Bills quarterback to Levi Wallace, because Tre'Davious White's on the other side. He's a great receiver, although Deontay Johnson gave him problems 2 years ago. Last year he had the yips game where he couldn't catch a cold. So
that didn't help that whole situation.
Exactly. So, I think there's different ways you can attack Levi Wallace because he's a solid NFL player, but he's not super great at anything. He's not a great athlete. He's not super big. So I think you can attack him with guys like Chase Claypool or Deontay Johnson who can, take advantage of him in different ways.
Yeah, I think that matchup, whoever we can get onto Wallace or whoever they try to have Wallace cover, I think that they're going to have a big day realistically, because I like Teron Johnson in the slot. He did have the pick 6 on Ben last year. He had a great play in the playoffs against Lamar. I remember too.
Basically the same play if I remember.
Pretty much, roughly, yeah. He's a good slot corner, especially against the guys we haven't. I think Deontay Johnson is good of a route runner as he is. It's not a huge disadvantage for Johnson. And we know what Tre'Davious White is. We don't want to have to attack him if we don't have to. If we get an opportunity to if he gets, if Claypool or somebody like him gets on top of him when we can go down the field, that's great. But I'm not relying on that. It's probably going to have to be whoever is getting Wallace most of the time. It's tough because I think if Juju gets him, he's more physical than him. I think he can out physical him and have some good plays on him. Maybe it's like jump balls and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to mention that the size thing for Juju is going to be at least some advantage over Teron Johnson. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's just going to. I really think ideally I want to get Claypool and Wallace. I just don't think that Wallace can compete with him at all, really, especially if you get him in the situation where it's a jump ball or downfield throw. He just doesn't have the size athleticism to compete with him. So I would prefer to try to get him on him as much as possible, try to get some big plays off that, but they're going to move those guys around, I'm sure, to try to keep us off.
And as we mentioned earlier, I think we both think the Steelers are going to run a lot of 12 personnel this year. I'm not sure this is the best game for that because the Bills have one of the best safety tandems in the league. maybe not the high end talent of the Steelers with Minka, but still both players, Jordan Poyer and
Really good players, yeah.
oh my God, thank you. Very good players. And then they have Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano as the linebackers, who are both very effective players in coverage. And Tremaine Edmonds he had a bit of a down year last year, but he's an incredible athlete.
Talent wise,
yeah, exactly.
You can't write him off even if he's struggling. Like he could flash a play all of a sudden.
Exactly. So, it's a pretty tough matchup for the Steelers across the board. We talked about this a little last week with our season long predictions, but we're going to go with our final predictions with a score. And, because it's 2021, we'll throw in the spread and maybe the totals. Shayne, what do you got as your score for this game?
So I have 28-24 Bills win.
Okay. So the Steelers or the Bills are favored by 6.5 points pretty universally across the betting line. So, anywhere you're looking, it's probably gonna be 6.5. So Shayne has the Steelers covering, and you also have the over hitting, if I'm doing my math right.
Yeah, over's 49.
Right. Yep. Over under's 49. So Shayne has the cover and the over. I'm going with Bills 30, Steelers 23. So I do not have the Steelers covering, and I also have the over. But, I think that's generally where a lot of people have that scoring idea or the scoring range. I think that the Steelers will be able to get some scores, but I think there's probably going to be at least one pretty bad turnover. And I think the Steelers will have to, the score will be closer than the game actually was, I think, because I think the Steelers will score at least once late, like kind of late through the fourth to make it closer. But I'm not very optimistic for the Steelers. And part of it is that I think that they have a lot of things that the players need to play with each other. So, they draw a tough opponent week one. Also, I'm not sure if we mentioned this on the we did mention this on the broadcast last time. I think that the Steelers haven't had a home opener since 2014.
Yeah, it's been a while, which is
insane. And I'm one to call some league office people about that. But anyways, Al Riveron's finally gone. So we have a small victory, but I think this is a tough draw for the Steelers in week one. And I'm not sure they're ready to really make a win out of it.
That's the tough thing, is this is a really tough matchup. We haven't played well against this team for the last 2 years. We've played them. Granted, 2019 was weird because Ben was hurt, and there's, we had old Duck out there throwing ducks. And even last year, that was coincided right in the time that our offense fell apart. So it's hard to say kind of how these teams truly match up together, but we have way more moving parts with our team right now than the Bills do. They have most of their lineup back from last year when they won the AFC East. It's just a tough match. Like, unless Josh Allen plays like 2018 Josh Allen, I don't see a really clear path for a victory in week one. It's tough for sure.
Yep. So that's our unfortunate predictions, and either said the Steelers winning. Obviously, we hope they will, and we'll be watching on Sunday at 1 p.m. on CBS. In the meantime, I'm Mitchell Wolfe. You can follow me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. I have a full preview and breakdown of this game coming out tomorrow on aroundtheblock.net or .com. Which one are we now?
I think it's .net still.
.net. Okay. It might be .com as well, but around the block, you can find it. We'll put it out on our Steelers ATV Twitter as well. Shayne, where can people find you?
And just at Shayne Kubas on Twitter. And I also have a related article for the Steelers coming out on Still Curtain, probably Friday here, about 4 players to watch on the Bills for that game.
Shayne has the keys to the Twitter, so I can I can bet you whose article's gonna get more promo.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be posting the Still Curtain one on ours.
Oh, that's a fair point. Good. Yeah, you're right.
I don't want to do two. I'm not trying to promote both.
You're not cross-pollinating.
I don't want to be doing that. So,
all right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We hope you come back next week with our review or recap of the Steelers game against the Bills. Have a good weekend. Go Steelers.